Dear friends, welcome to our Holy Week meditations. Today is the first of 3 meditations that we'll do across this week. On Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we'll be looking at Luke chapter 20 and 21. These chapters prepare us for the passion that Jesus will go through on Good Friday, as well as the victory of the resurrection on Sunday. My prayer is that these meditations will help us prepare ourselves as we reflect upon the events that led up to the cross, as we look ahead to the victory that Jesus will have at the resurrection. At the same time, we come examining our own motives and our own hearts as we come also face to face with the cross, and as we contemplate the experience that Jesus had all this way through the Gospel of Luke. May we also come face to face with our Lord and our Master, who gave himself for us on the cross. Today we'll be looking at Luke chapter 20, verses 1 to 26. And tomorrow we'll continue in chapter 20, verse 27 to chapter 21, verse 4. And on Wednesday, we'll be looking at Luke chapter 21 from verses 5 to 38. Let's spend these next 3 days spending time with the Lord as we meditate over these 2 chapters in the Gospel. Let me now read for us from Luke chapter 20, verses 1 to 26. One day, as Jesus was teaching the people in the temple and preaching the gospel, the chief priests and the scribes with the elders came up and said to him, "Tell us, by what authority you do these things, or who it is that gave you this authority?" He answered them, "I also will ask you a question. Now tell me, was the baptism of John from heaven or from men?" And they discussed it with one another, saying, "If we say, from heaven, he will say, 'Why did you not believe him?' But if we say, from men, all the people will stone us to death, for they are convinced that John was a prophet." So they answered that they did not know where it came from. And Jesus said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things." And he began to tell the people this parable. A man planted a vineyard and let it out to tenants and went into another country for a long while. When the time came, he sent a servant to the tenants so that they would give him some of the fruit of the vineyard. But the tenants beat him and sent him away empty-handed. And he sent another servant. But they also beat and treated him shamefully and sent him away empty-handed. And he sent yet a third. This one also they wounded and cast out. Then the owner of the vineyard said, "What shall I do? I will send my beloved son. Perhaps they will respect him." But when the tenants saw him, they said to themselves, "This is the heir. Let us kill him, so that the inheritance may be ours." And they threw him out of the vineyard and killed him. What then will the owner of the vineyard do to them? He will come and destroy those tenants and give the vineyard to others. When they heard this, they said, "Surely not." But he looked directly at them and said, "What then is this that is written? The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces, and when it falls on anyone, it will crush him." The scribes and the chief priests sought to lay hands on him at that very hour, for they perceived that he had told this parable against them, but they feared the people. So they watched him and sent spies who pretended to be sincere, that they might catch him in something he said, so as to deliver him up to the authority and jurisdiction of the governor. So they asked him, "Teacher, we know that you speak and teach rightly, and show no partiality, but truly teach the way of God. Is it lawful for us to give tribute to Caesar or not?" But he perceived their craftiness and said to them, "Show me a denarius. Whose likeness and inscription does it have?" They said, Caesar's." He said to them, "Then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." And they were not able, in the presence of the people, to catch him in what he said. But marveling at his answer, they became silent. In Luke's Gospel, Jesus arrives in Jerusalem in Luke chapter 19. Prior to Jesus arriving in Jerusalem in Luke 19, the last time Jesus was at the temple was when he was just 12 years old and his parents had left Jerusalem without him. And prior to that, Jesus was recorded by Luke to be at the temple when he was presented as a baby at just 40 days old. But something interesting in the Gospel of Luke that we see from this narrative is that the first thing that Jesus does when he enters the temple in Jerusalem, he cleanses the temple. And we see this in the preceding verses to the text that we've just read. And just immediately before this, we are told that Jesus stood over Jerusalem and he wept over the city. And so when Jesus enters into this temple, he cleanses the temple and he begins to teach the people in the temple each day. We are told that he was teaching the people and preaching the gospel. And the elders and the scribes and the elders, they came up to trap Jesus, hoping that they would get Jesus into trouble. Jesus coming into the temple is significant, not only because the temple is the place where the divine and the earthly meet, but Jesus, being both divine and human, enters into the temple to do something quite important. Just a few days ago, I was reading in my devotions from Exodus chapter 26. And in Exodus chapter 26, there are descriptions of how the people were to build the tabernacle. This was to be this long, this high, made of this material. The ropes would be about this color and would measure this length. So precise and exacting were the standards for the tabernacle. So much that God demanded from his people to prepare the tabernacle as a space where he himself, his presence, would dwell amongst his people. And we all know that the tabernacle of the Old Testament really is the precursor or the forerunner of the temple, the same temple that Solomon built and later on was rebuilt by the exiles as they returned to Jerusalem, and the temple that King Herod had refurbished and renovated to its present grandeur. But instead of celebrating the magnificence of this great temple, Jesus entered the temple to cleanse it. Jesus, the same, the God who had commanded the people to build the tabernacle and to build the temple, came to cleanse the temple. And that's why the chief priests and the scribes were all questioning Jesus. By whose authority have you come to tell us to do this and to do that? Whose authority? Well, Jesus has authority over the temple, because Jesus is the new temple, the place where the divine and the earthly will meet, where Jesus, being fully God and fully human, this is the place where the new temple is. Jesus is building a new temple. He is the one that is coming to bring the sacred, piercing and penetrating into our world. So whose authority? Jesus is the master. He is the Lord of the whole world, and as Luke certainly believed, he is the one who is coming to make his lordship known. This new temple, Jesus himself, the place where all of humanity, all of creation will come into before the Lord and the Master, the Creator himself. Immediately after he was questioned about whose authority it was that he came, Jesus tells this parable about the wicked tenants. And it is clear from this text that the chief priests and the scribes understood that Jesus was talking about them. They had been the tenants who have been tending this vineyard, which is not just the temple, but the people of God. And instead of being faithful in their work, in taking care of the vineyard, they had abused those who had come on behalf of the master to collect the fruits, as it was customary to do so. This parable relates closely to a story that we read in Isaiah about how there was someone who came to build a vineyard, to build a piece of land, and to fence it up. And we know this to be the people of God. Jesus was again challenging the chief priests and the scribes. By whose authority are you telling Jesus or telling the people that they run this place, or they are in charge of the temple, or they have this spiritual well-being at their command? Instead, Jesus tells the scribes and the chief priests and the elders that they were just like the wicked tenants. They have beaten and hurt those that God have sent, the prophets that God had sent to collect not just the first fruits, but to warn the people of what was happening to this vineyard. And then Jesus goes on to say that when the master decided that all the previous helpers that he had sent had come away with nothing, he decides to send his son. This is so clear, telling us that Jesus is the one who has now come to reclaim what was rightfully his. But instead of honoring what they should have done, instead of recognizing the authority, the very authority of Jesus, they once again abused their position, their place of hierarchy in the spiritual realm of the religious practice of what they have been doing in the land and in the temple. And they would go on to kill him. It is fascinating because in the Gospel of Luke, the phrases chief priest and scribe comes up a few times only. And the last time that it comes up in the Gospel of Luke is in Luke chapter 23, when Pilate spoke to the people asking to release Jesus. And the final words of the chief priests and the scribes in the Gospel of Luke are these two words: crucify him. Whose authority is shown? The authority of the chief priests, the scribes, the elders, or the authority of the Son of God? Jesus, who is the new temple, who is bringing about a restoration in this temple, whose death will usher in a new kingdom, and whose resurrection will show us what it means to truly commune with God. That we will have life eternal, because life in the kingdom is one of intimacy, one of direct encounter and worship with Almighty God. And that's why immediately after this, Jesus tells the story, or rather asks the question of the teachers, show me a denarius. You know, the scribes and the chief priests were trying to bait Jesus into saying something nasty about the Romans, because the Roman coin had the figure or the portrait of Caesar, and it was something that the Jews were not supposed to use because it contained a graven image. But Jesus asked them this question: whose image is shown? Now the priests and the scribes, they answered Jesus and say, Surely it's Caesar's. We know it. You know it. And then Jesus says, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. But what the chief priests and the scribes failed to do was to ask, then where is God's image found? Where is God's image found? If we are to render the things of God to God, where is God's image found? If they had asked that question, they would have known the answer, that we are made in the image of God. Whose authority? Whose image? Brothers and sisters, as we come towards Good Friday and Easter, let us recognize that Jesus comes with the authority from on high. Jesus is the new temple. He's establishing a new temple, a new place, a new kingdom where the sacred and the earthly will meet again. A place where God and humanity will dwell together. Because the image of God is upon us. We belong to God. And we belong to this new temple. And so, would you consider, as you reflect over the events leading up to Good Friday, who do you belong to? Whose image is on you? And what authority does Jesus have as he comes to build his new temple? May we be part of this new temple that he's building. May we be part of this new people that he's establishing. His body, which is broken on the cross, his blood that is shed on the cross, is the invitation to us to join with him as he builds this new temple. So may we all recognize the authority of Jesus and remember whose image is upon us. May God bless you as you continue this journey through Holy Week. And I pray that these meditations will guide us as we fix our eyes firmly on Jesus. May God bless you.